My name is Katalina Salas, and I am a PhD candidate at the University of Texas at El Paso in the Environmental Science and Engineering program. And I work with Dr. Deanna Pennington, who does a lot of work with like teams in science and social learning. So I get to do that. I think a lot of it stems from me being a scientist who's always been connected to like my community, growing up with a science teacher as a mom, like teaching and connecting science to other people was always a really big thing. But then also, I think coming in after doing a master's in sustainability somewhere else in a different country, I learned that science looks very different for people in all over the world. And so if you really want to make your science impactful, I think it has to be usable, right? There's no point in kind of creating all these publications and these fancy models and these really cool tools if they're just going to stay on paper or on a dashboard and never be used by anyone. A lot of times we're trained as scientists to be extractive, to kind of have a question, then find a solution and not kind of interact with the people that we're making the solution for. So stepping away from that extractiveness and being more wholesome. And this is something that a lot of indigenous people have, it's embedded in their culture, right? It's this form of, I guess, being connected and understanding that it's a community and not something for you to take. That's a practice that I think I try to use. And I gained a lot of that experience through La Semilla. So they have like this structure. I'm on their board, so we don't use like the typical ways of being a board and the rules and the laws that you're supposed to have in communicating with each other. We're very much like peer-to-peer. And I think having those practices, even as scientists, that peer-to-peer relationship and then doing that also with the community, and we're all at the same level, contributing the same way, is a really good practice when doing this kind of work. Because the minute I think that we put that wall in between us, then you're like 20 steps back. The skills that I think are very essential, even attitudes to allow for actionable knowledge work to be done. For sure, number one, I think, is having that open mind to be uncomfortable. As a scientist, maybe not knowing the direction of how your work is going to go. So keeping that open mind to listen to the people you're working with, because they can contribute just as much as the scientist can, regardless of where they're coming from, right? Background, if they're interacting with the system that you're working in, they bring valuable knowledge. So keeping that open mind to leave that space. I always tell people you gotta be comfortable with being uncomfortable with the open space of people not talking maybe at first, and then kind of building that trust, which is, I think, the biggest step in doing actionable knowledge work, is kind of building those connections with people in the room, gaining trust with each other, which, like I said, can take a long time. So patience, I guess, is also another one with doing actual knowledge work. Another one is being adaptive. So there's all these metrics, there's all these frameworks on how to kind of do collaboration, build that trust, but it's all very specific on where you're doing your work. We had this huge grant to make these really cool models and then integrate them onto an online interface that was free and open to be used by the public. And then my job was to actually see if at that point our work was actually usable by stakeholders at multiple levels. And a lot of projects do this, right? They incorporate stakeholders from the beginning. So we had stakeholder workshops, but that step always takes longer than you think it does. There's a lot of iteration that needs to be done, because even though it was simplified by us as scientists, there are stakeholders that are always going to be confused by that modeling component. Adapting the interface to provide something that's useful for other stakeholders that don't have that like savviness for using models will probably be the next step for the project I'm on, is making that other connection something more tangible for people who don't want to do modeling. So that's kind of the work I did on my project. And I think the biggest takeaway that I got, even if the modeling didn't work, was bringing all those people together with this tangible kind of thing in front of them that they could play with and use, brought up these conversations that a lot of them didn't have on their own. So creating those connections within the community with community members from different levels, policy, activists, educators, people just who live in the community, allowing them to talk at a table together, generated these conversations, and I think gave an idea of that they could work together, even though they're from different sectors, on fixing these issues in our region.